So I hesitate about even talking about Sodom and Gomorrah because it's really not a major passage in the discussions around LGBT inclusion anymore, but I will just as background for those who are interested. As it turns out, virtually all progressives and the majority of conservative biblical scholars believe that Sodom and Gomorrah, their sin was not homosexuality. And I'll just point out a couple of reasons why, and that's kind of why this passage is not really talked about as much in this area. The first is in Genesis 19, when it's talking about the men approaching the door of Lot at his house to have sex with his visitors, the men who visited him. 3 times it says all of the men of Sodom came to the door. And where has there ever been a city that is all gay men? You can't have a city. You don't have families. You don't have, it just doesn't work. And certainly not in the ancient world. You don't have a city like that. So obviously there's some things going on in the context where maybe there's some other things going on. And so when we look at the rest of the scripture and what the scripture says is going on, in Jude verse 7, it says that, it says this, in a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. It doesn't describe what that sexual immorality is or what that perversion is. In general, the scholars believe that it's gang rape and that it's violence against strangers, because there are 2 other key passages that are very specific about what the sin of Sodom was. The first is in Ezekiel 16, verses 49 and 50. It's the only passage in the Old Testament that literally defines the sin of Sodom. And this is what it says. Now, this is the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. They didn't care for those on the margins. That was the problem with Sodom and Gomorrah. And in a culture where outside visitors would come and have no place to stay, they were literally at risk because of the elements. Hospitality was a major issue in the ancient world. And Sodom did not show hospitality. They didn't care for those who were in need. In fact, if you think about it, this is largely how the church has treated the gay community over the past 2,000 years. Not kindly. So that's Ezekiel 16. But Jesus himself also speaks about the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah when he's sending out his disciples to do the same sorts of thing that the angels were doing, right? Going to another place where they would be exposed to the elements and would be completely reliant on the people who live there to be cared for. He sends them out without food, without an extra cloak, without any money. Jesus is very clear that for those who would not accept them, he says in Matthew 10, verses 14 through 16, if anyone won't welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly, I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than it will be for that town. Jesus clarifies that the issue is hospitality, welcoming those who are in need, just like it does in Ezekiel chapter 16. This is the sin of Sodom. It's not homosexuality. And so largely this passage has been sort of taken out of the discussion around LGBT inclusion in the church. But if you'd like to explore some other issues, and if your church is interested in having these conversations in healthy ways, come join us at Small Church Big Table.